Hello, and thank you for joining us for this How-To Tails and Tails box cross-stitch. Today, I'll be walking you through the steps on how to complete this box cross-stitch project. To get us started, I'll go over the supplies needed to complete this project. First, you'll need a 14 count Ida cloth. If you signed up for a supply kit, a large piece of 14 count Ida cloth will be included in the kit. I suggest cutting this down to a 7 by 7 inch square just to make it easier to work with. You'll also need an embroidery hoop. This is a 6-inch wooden embroidery hoop. I chose the 6-inch because it makes it easier to stitch, but you could go as small as a 4-inch hoop to complete this project. You'll also need a needle, and I recommend the size 24 count tapestry needle. The tapestry needle is more of a blunt needle than a regular sewing needle, and it works well for these projects because Ida cloth has a weave to their cloth, and we want to work with the weave to complete our pattern grid instead of breaking the threads of the weave, which a sharper needle will do. So I recommend the tapestry needle for this kind of project. You'll also need 6 different colors of embroidery floss and the fox cross-stitch pattern. The pattern will be included in the supply kit, and it will also be available to download on the library website. Included on the pattern is a list of the cross-stitch threads, embroidery threads that you'll need to complete the project. I'll also use a pair of scissors, and I've included a cup of water to wet the ends of my thread so I can complete the project. And these are the supplies you'll need to complete this box cross-stitch. Now that we have all of our supplies ready to go, I'm going to show you how to find the center of your Ida cloth. So I take my 7 by 7 inch square and fold it in half. And then I'm going to unfold it and fold it in half the other way. Then I'm going to fold again along that line that we folded earlier to make a nice neat square. And there at the place where our 2 folds meet, that is where the center of our Ida cloth is. And I mark that with a needle. So you take your needle, make sure that's a good crisp line. And then I just kind of enlarge that hole a little bit. That way we can see it once we put our cloth onto our hoop. So there is the center of our Ida cloth. Now we're going to place our Ida cloth onto our hoop, and we will unscrew the top part here. There we go. We're going to lay the smaller inner hoop down and try to center as well as we can here. And then we're going to lay the larger hoop over the top. Once you have it on there, you're going to start tightening up the hoop again, stopping to kind of pull. Oops. So the more tense the more tension you have in your cloth, the easier it's going to be to get the needle through. And then you're just going to keep tightening as much as you can because we do want there to be a lot of tension in the cloth. And as you can see, mine doesn't fit perfectly on here, but because we're using the 6-inch hoop, It doesn't need to be perfectly centered in the hoop. It'll just be centered on the cloth, which makes our end project a little easier, even if you're not keeping the project in the hoop. So, and there is our fabric on our hoop. So next we have to find the center of our pattern. And I've clearly marked it on our pattern. It's this dark square outlined here, and that's the center of the pattern. So that's the center that we marked on our Ida cloth. And then we're going to count over to the closest next part of the pattern. So we're going to start with this dark blue color and make the book stack first. So I'm going to count over from our hole that we have made in our Ida cloth where we just enlarged that one hole to mark the center. That is that top corner right here. And so we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is where we're going to start making our stitches because we stitch from the top down. So we're going to count that again just to double check and make sure that we have the number right. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're going to remember that number while we put our thread on our needle. So when you cut your embroidery floss or you get it cut in the kit, it is actually made up of 6 strands and we only need 2 to complete our project. So I split those up and we're just going to make sure that we pull 2 threads here. And when you receive the thread in the supply kit, it's already going to be cut down to this size. If you are just making this at home on your own, I would suggest keeping your threads a little shorter. You don't want them too short because you want to be able to complete enough stitches, but you don't want them to be too long because it's easy to get them tangled. So I find this to be a very good length. And we're going to make sure that these are lined up, nice and even. So now I have 2 threads and I'm just going to wet the end of my finger with my cup of water so that I can wet the thread. And then you'll just thread your needle. Sometimes it's easier said than done. There we go. Okay, and I just pull through a little tail to keep it in there. And then now we count it over from the center and it should be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's going to be our starting point. So we need to do the same thing here. We're going to count over starting at the middle that we marked. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to be starting about right there. And if it's easier for you, you can enlarge that hole just a little bit. And then you can count over from the back as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so that is going to be our starting point. And we're going to pull through, but we're not going to pull through the thread all of the way. We want to leave a little bit of a tail in the back as well. Just a little bit. I would say like less than ½ inch. You just have that little piece and we're going to hold that down. And then to make the cross stitch stitch, you're going to go to the bottom corner of our square. So you've got your starting point and you're going to go diagonally down to that next row, over and down 1. And then you're going to pull that through. It's going to look like this, a little diagonal line. And then on the back, we've held this little piece of tail of our thread, and we're going to go up to the very next hole right above and next to where we started. Oh, whoops, I went up one too far. Let's try that again. There we go. So right above where we went through at the bottom. There we go. And then we're going to go over and down diagonally across the thread that the stitch we just made to create an X, and that is the cross stitch. It's just little X's. So now I'm gonna go up and over. Oh, too far. There we go. And make the next cross. There. So now I have one X and a diagonal line. And we're going to count over on our pattern to see how many of these X's, these little boxes we need to make. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I'm going to double count. I like to count twice just to make sure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Got the same number, and we've already made one. So instead of completing that X again, I'm gonna do a running stitch where I'm going to make all of the same side of the stitch. So instead of, we're gonna go right to the one right above the stitch we just made. There we go. And instead of going back across and completing the X, we're gonna go diagonal again to the next one, down and across one. So now we have 2 slashes. So that's 1, 2, 3, and we're just going to complete that entire row all the way over to 16. So 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and count those out, and when you get over to the end, I can show you how to go back over again. So now that we've completed the one side of the running cross stitch, we have one completed cross stitch, which is the full X. So we should have 15 slash mark stitches. So I always count to make sure that I'm right. So I have 15 slashes. And now that I've done this part of the running stitch, I'm gonna go to the top of the hole that I just went through. So the one right above it, and pull through. And just to point out on the back, as I made those running stitches, I made sure that I tucked the tail of the thread in, and that just holds it into place to make sure that our thread doesn't get loose. So I just kept feeding that little tail that we left in. So now it's all stitched down, so it's gonna stay in place. So now I'm gonna go back and just complete the other half of the running cross stitch. So I'll go back through and complete all of those. So here's this next dash, and that is a completed cross stitch. We're gonna go to the one right above it. And we're just gonna run back along and complete those cross stitches. So go ahead and complete that row, and then we'll go on to the next row. Now we should have a completed row of 16 cross stitches. So we should have 16 X's here, and we're gonna start on the next row above. So we're gonna turn this around, and we're going to just go to, it's going to be like a little bit of a diagonal line, because we're going to go to the row right above where we started and just push that one through. And then I'm going to leave my needle here, just kind of tuck that in where I know I'm going to be going next, which is diagonally down one. And then I'm going to count how many we need for our second row on this book here. We need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to complete 9 running stitches. So some people can don't have to flip their cross stitch over, and they can just do the stitch this way, which I can find a little tricky sometimes. And since the 6-inch hoop fits so well in my hand, it's easy to flip it over. For me it is, and that way I make sure that I am not missing any stitches and I'm going right in the place that I need to. So that's a nice thing about the 6-inch and smaller hoops. They fit in your hand really well, and so they're easy to kind of flip back and forth as you're working. Sometimes when you're working on larger projects, that can be harder to do, and in those cases what I like to do is use some kind of light. Sometimes I'll sit with my like a tablet on my lap, lit up in the background. That way I can see the holes of my Ida a little bit better. And it also helps to sit under a really bright light when you're working on your cross stitch as well. So if you're having trouble seeing the stitches, try to move to a more well-lit area, or you can try to backlight your cross stitch by putting a tablet or some sort of light source on your lap so that you can see it a little bit easier. But let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, one more. Okay, and now we're going to just complete that cross stitch by going to the one right above. There we go. And then we're going to go back and complete the other half of this running cross stitch. So you're going to continue working on this one until you get close to the end of your thread. When it's starting to get a little difficult for you to complete your stitches, go ahead and unpause the video and I will show you how to tie off your one stitch or your thread and start your next. So this is the point that I got to with my thread before I decided it's time to switch to a new one. So I've done some running stitches here. If you didn't get this far, that's fine. If you got farther, that's great, but it's all going to be the same no matter what part we're in. We're going to go to the back, and then we're going to take our thread and feed it back through the line of stitches that we just made. So we're going to go under, and we want to make sure that we're going under the thread, but not through the Ida cloth. And we're just going to use the stitches that we just made to hold down our thread, and that's going to be our end for this one. So. There we go. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we'll just pull that through like this. And then we're going to take our scissors and we're just going to cut close there. It's nice if you have some nice sharp crafting scissors. I'm just using regular scissors. So, and then we're just going to set the little end piece aside. And there we have it. It's tied off. And there it is. And then we're just going to take the thread that we had before, and we're just going to take 2 more pieces of thread out of it. So there should be 2 left. So we'll use that one for our next part. Here we go. I'm going to wet my finger again with my cup of water so I can wet my thread. And then we're just going to thread our needle again. There we go. Leaving a little tail. And we're going to do just what we did before. We're going to start the next one over. And we're going to tuck a little bit of the tail here at the end. I'm going to make this one a little shorter because I want it to fit kind of with the blue that we have going. So then you're just going to hold that down and go ahead and do your one down diagonal across. There we go. And we're going to make sure that when we go above, we're going to tuck that tail in and stitch over it to hold it down. There we go. And then we're going to complete our running stitch across here, making sure that we tuck that thread down and stitch over it to hold it down each time. There we go. And then I'm going to just keep going back over my cross stitch and complete the dark blue book. And then when you finish that part, go ahead and unpause the video and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I'm here at the end of my dark blue book. I'm just finishing that last stitch. And I'm going to go ahead and tie off my thread completely. So I'm going to feed it back through the stitches that we just completed. And then pull it all the way through and cut the thread. And right now I have plenty of this dark blue thread, so I'm going to set this one aside because there's just a little bit left there. And now we have completed one color of this book here. And you could go ahead and pull the tan and complete the color, but what I like to do is do all of the same thread color at one time. So I'm going to go ahead and count down from where we started down to this bottom dark blue book here on our pattern. And I'm going to go to the very bottom row and count down for that one. So that's the next part that I'm going to. And I always double count. When I make my count and over one, I double count just to make sure. If my number is different that second time, I count a third time. And I'll go ahead and complete all of the dark blue and then start the green and do the green and then do the light blue. And I'll complete this book stack before I move over to the fox. But you can choose to go wherever you would like to and continue working your pattern. I am going to save the black parts till the very end because those ones will not be as neat. I like to keep the back of my cross stitch as neat as possible just so that if there are mistakes, I can go back through and pick them out a little easier. I'm going to show you the back of my completed one. Hang on just a moment. So this was my test to make sure that the pattern was easy to work. And as you can see, I like to keep the back pretty neat. But when I got to the black section, because they're so short and kind of far apart, some of them are only one stitch at a time, I went ahead and did those last. That way I could go over and I wouldn't have to cut my thread just for one stitch. So the black, I would suggest that you leave that till the very end, and that way you can kind of go over and be a little more messy at the end and not have to worry about if you make mistakes, and unpicking it will still be easy to do. So go ahead and just work and complete your cross stitch. After you're finished, you can leave it displayed in your hoop like this, or you can add it to pillows. They can go well on tote bags. You can also frame them and put them up. If you're going to leave it in the hoop, what you're going to want to do is I usually choose a piece of felt, either one that matches a color here or black or just a plain neutral color, and I trace the edge of my hoop to make sure that they're the same size, and then cut that out. And you're going to tuck all of these pieces together here and kind of get them all in, and then I take a glue gun and just lightly glue around the edge and start adding the felt backing so that this will all be kind of neat and tidy and tucked away. So that is how I finish my cross stitch. I hope that you enjoy working this cross stitch pattern, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at the library and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you.